Hi guys, you're joining me today at the fabulous Woodlands View Fishery. Now we're getting to that time of year when the water temperature and the air temperature is really starting to rise. Today we'll be looking at getting into like a 20 degrees. Now this time of year what can happen, the fish can become very moody, and what tends to happen, they rise to the surface of the water and they tend to be very difficult to catch when feeding bait. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you through two methods that I use to still be able to catch those fish, which is slapping and dobbing. Right, so what is dobbing? First of all, the first thing I want to say about dobbing, it is a method that you have to have in your armoury for this time of year. It wins so many matches, it's unreal. One of the reasons why it wins so many matches is because the fish are very, very big. So you have to get your setup dead right. But dobbing, or even mugging, as a lot of people like to call it, is a method where you're not creating any disturbance on the water. You're not feeding any bait, making any noise. What you're actually doing is actually sat on your peg, mainly with the top kit in your hands, and you're actually looking to visualize, you see the fish, swing your rig to the fish and try and land your hook bait as close to the nose of the fish as possible. What I did on that one then, I could just see it coming in towards me, and I just shipped on two sections, flicked it to it, landed about 3-4 inches in front of his nose, and then all you got to do then is make sure you watch the float, and when one has it, the float goes under and you'll catch it. But it's one really important thing is that when you're not shipping out and looking to catch a fish, is that you don't leave the pole over the water. Because if you leave the pole over the water, what this does is just scares the fish and it detracts from the fish coming into your peg. So what the process is, I sit on my box with the top kit in my hand, wait till I see one, ship out, and look to flick my rig towards the nose of the fish. And there you can see, just another massive fish. I'll take you through my rig quickly once I've unhooked this one. But you can see what I mean just about the size of the fish. They really are big. You don't have to catch many fish at all. You see a lot of great anglers, they'll just be sat at their peg, not really doing much, flicking their rig about in the peg, catching an odd one, and they end up with a massive weight. Now for me, it's really important that you get your rig right. I'll talk you through it now. The first thing I'll talk about is the hook. Now, like I said, the fish really are big, so it's absolutely pointless messing about with small hooks, light lines. It's just real no benefit to your catch rate. To start off with, I've got a size 14 MV-R hair rigger hook, which is a really big, thick gauge hook. It's a great hook. You will never get straightened out on it. You just want something nice and strong and durable. The hook length itself is 0.20, which is really thick line, but it's, like I said, it's just no benefit to fishing light lines or small hooks. What I've actually done is done something a little bit different on my mugging rig. The hook length I use is actually 10 inches long. That's because the best depth for me when you're mugging is to have your float about 12 inches from the hook. So I use a 10-inch hook length, 2 loops, 1 number 9 shot leading up to your little dibber float. Now for some reason, whenever I fish shallow for fish, it's the same on a pellet waggler or when I'm mugging, whenever I'm going to fish one depth all day and I know that that is the correct depth, I always like to use the hook length as long as that depth. I'm not sure why it works, but whenever I'm fishing with it, it just always seems to feel that I'm doing it right with a hook, with a long hook length, rather than having knots near your hook. Then the main line itself of the rig is actually 0.22, again nice and strong and durable, just a bit heavier than your hook length. The dibber I'm using is really, really light. It only takes 1 number 9 stop. Now that's really important for me, because when you actually visualize and see the fish coming into your peg and you flick your hook bait at the fish, the last thing you want is when where your hook bait and your float land on the surface of the water, you don't want your float making more noise than the hook bait, because what can actually happen, the fish can come to the noise, and if your float makes more noise, it will come to your float instead of your hook bait. So it's really important that when you flick your rig out, always make sure that your hook bait makes more noise than the float, and that'll catch you a lot more fish. The length of line between the float and the pole tip is really important. I like to use just a little bit short of a length of the top kit. So today I've just shortened it down about 10 inches. So that's a long rig for the depth that you're fishing, but that's really important that you don't keep your pole tip near the fish. The elastic is really important. I've got a 15 to 18 tricore. Again, you're catching massive fish, you don't want to be using light elastics. Tricore elastic for me is really important because it's strong and durable. The top kit, like I said, is a long top kit, so you've got plenty of elastic in your pole. So when you hook a big fish, you can let it run off out of your peg, and then you can get them in nice and quickly. But like I said, a real strong, durable, all-round rig. Get this method right. Sit on your box, wait for the fish to come in. Don't leave your pole hanging over the water. Catch an odd fish all day, and it really can lead to big match weights. Right, the other method I want to talk to you about that works unbelievably well this time of year is slapping, which is very similar to dobbing or mugging in the aspect that you're not actually feeding any bait. But what you're doing when you slap your rig over like this is that you're creating noise to mimic other bait going into your peg. Then when the fish arrive to the noise, it's just your hook bait there. So what I like to do is try and slap my rig over 4 or 5 times like that, create a lot of noise, and then drop your rig in. It's very simple in the aspect that that's all you're doing. You're not feeding any bait. It works unbelievably well when the fish are coming to noise but not necessarily eating lots of bait. When I slap my rig over 3 or 4 times, or even maybe 5 times, I'm creating the noise of pellets going in the water, but like I said, it's just your hook bait, and this is why it works so well, because the fish can pick out your hook bait over any other pellets that were to be put in the peg. What I'll do now, I'll give it one more slap, then I'll quickly ship in and talk you through my rig. It's very similar to dobbing with just a few little minor changes. One thing you have to massively think about when fishing like this and when dobbing is what pole you're using. The last thing that you want is to be turning your rig over like this, creating a nice noise from your hook bait and your float, and then your pole tip to hit the water. Your pole just can't be sloppy. You need a really stiff, rigid pole. Today I'm using the MV-RXX, but I've got a short fore in as well, which makes a massive difference. I can rotate the rig over as fast as I want, and I know that 100% my pole tip isn't going to hit the water creating any excess noise. I want all the noise coming from my hook bait and my float. The other thing is, with a rigid pole, when you do get a bite and you're fishing a 3-foot line between your float and your pole tip, is you're going to hit a load more bites. When the float goes under like that, the last thing that you want is your pole to be hitting the water and it to be sloppy. You want it to be nice and rigid. So use an MV-RXX with a short fore and you can't go wrong. Right, to start with, the hook, exactly the same as what I'm using on my dobbing rig, a size 14 MVR hair rigger hook. Again, this way of fishing, you just catch big fish. You really don't want to be messing about with small hooks that are going to bend out when you hook a great big fish. The hook length itself is 0.20 again, exactly the same as dobbing, but it's tied in a slightly shorter length. I'm using a 6-inch hook length for this on this rig, because when you're fishing like this, sometimes just changing your depth can be really good. You can just deepen off or shallow off, and you can have another good little run. Where it's a little bit different when you're dobbing, you're just fishing at one set depth. The main line itself is 0.22 again, just slightly heavier than my hook length. Now I'm actually using a float on this rig instead of the dibber, because what can happen when you're fishing probably 12, 14, 15 inches deep, you can flick your rig over, flick your pellet into the water, and you can get some bites on the drop. So I'm using the MVR Series 6, which has just got a small, thick, hollow bristle in, which makes it nice and easy to see, and you can indicate some bites on the drop. The line between my pole tip and my float on this rig is slightly shorter, because when you're rotating your rig 4 or 5 times, a long line that I'm using on my dobbing rig is quite difficult because you've got to move the pole so much. So one little trick I use, I'd actually put the float near my nose, and then wherever my hand reaches, that's the length of line that I use. I don't know why, it just works perfect for me. Whenever I use that length of line, I can flick my rig over, I can create a lot of noise, and that's the best length of line for me. Again, exactly the same elastic, 15 to 18 tricore, absolutely amazing elastic for landing fish of excess of 12, 15 pound. A long top kit, again exactly the same as my dobbing. So it's very similar, just a slightly shorter hook length, different float and a different length of line, but all again really robust, strong line is going to get you out all the big fish that you hook when you fish like this. Well, there you go. 2 absolutely fantastic methods to try this time of year in the warmer weather. Get out on the bank and give them a go for yourself.